you have to be vigilant. Every day you've got to make sure that the message is being sent to the workforce.
This is Michael Ciannilli, who developed and ran the NASA Lessons Learned program that focused on the Challenger, Columbia, and Apollo disasters.
The folks in the organizations have to feel it's not just platitudes or a nice slogan, but that's really how it is. You know, we honor dissenting opinion. We welcome dissenting opinion. There's no ramifications. Maybe lose a little time, maybe cost a little extra, but it's far short of having another accident.
And you live through that, right? And you question yourself, why? What did I do wrong? So you go through a lot of emotional. And then I had the honor, very difficult duty, but honor to go into Texas with many other folks and search and to bring Columbia and the crew home. So you go through something very intimate, very personal and difficult. And so that experience and then working for every member, it became even stronger and stronger working with the families, working with people and saying, you know what, we've got to learn everything we can. In the crew's memory, we have to do that. And in the spirit of all the folks that are going to fly in future rockets and all the folks on the ground. So it became a mission of mine that we have to learn. We can't let this be forgotten.
So what are some of the lessons that you share about what you learned from Columbia and some of the other tragedies?
Yeah, great question, Tom. And what's very interesting is people often ask, what are the lessons? What's the difficult part? How is it hard? And I said, well, interestingly, and forgive the pun here, but actually the rocket science part is pretty easy. We've got that figured out. The rocket stuff, between Isaac Newton and Galileo and all those folks starting us out until today, the chemistry, the physics, we kind of got that part figured. The hard part is the warm, squishy stuff in between. It's the people part, right? It's the stuff that we learned as children that we struggle with as being people. For example, it's communicating effectively, right? And so we share messages, for example, communication. In today's world, right, we're talking live through the internet. How exciting has technology developed, right? But we often caution our folks saying just because we're communicating more through perhaps Twitter and Facebook and online and email, it doesn't mean we're communicating more effectively. Nothing replaces that face-to-face where we're looking in each other's eyes, we're communicating, we're watching each other's body language, we're gleaming all that extra information that comes through in communication. And we're trying to tell our folks, make sure when you're saying things, people are understanding. And you're also hearing and listening to what people are saying. And I say that really specifically because in times past when we haven't done such a good job, we didn't listen. When Challenger was having issues before, the other vehicles were having issues before the Challenger loss, the vehicles and the hardware were talking to us. Things were happening, and we didn't listen to the hardware as much as we should have. Sometimes before Columbia, we didn't listen to each other in different teams and organizations as best we could. So we say these things, they're in some ways you see them as the easiest things, but honestly, in some ways, they're the hardest things to remember and to do right.
So I have to ask you this, and because it's a unique chance to ask someone like you this question, but what's it like leading a launch countdown for the space shuttle? I mean,
it's incredible. It's incredible. It's electric. It's one of those feelings. It's one of the most intense environments and one of the most fun environments at the same exact time. It's I almost like to walk on a high wire act, but it might be something similar. It is just exciting. It's you're walking the edge of the envelope. You've got a vehicle that weighs, say, 4.5 million pounds. It's loaded with fuel that has the explosive potential of an atomic bomb. You've got your friends and colleagues and American heroes sitting on top of it. You got all your coworkers around it, and you got your launch team working with you, and it's incredible.
So you bring up two interesting points that cross all industry lines, and that is, number one, don't ignore the small things, and number two, communication. And so as we look to the lessons learned from, Challenger, Columbia, et cetera, how can companies take these specifically and put them into play? How can we in the outside world from NASA use what you're teaching to better our companies?
Thank you, Tom. That's an excellent question, because we're doing that today. We're going to companies and sharing with them. And the exciting answer, it's different for every organization and company. So we're working with medical institutions, we're working with finance organizations, we're working with aerospace and defense, and everybody in between. And so the approach is a little bit different in some ways based on what they do and how they do it. So we kind of tweak the message a bit and tweak the solutions. One of the biggest things that tie it all together, though, is vigilance. So we, of course, we get really good at learning, and we get really good at doing things. And Liz and I were talking after a health scare, perhaps. Maybe the doctor tells you, eat more lean meats, right? Stop eating perhaps other foods, and try to be careful of your diet. Or perhaps if you have a bad back, after that, you're exercises every day. You're really vigilant doing this. But over time, we tend to kind of slack off a little bit.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And education is much more effective when we look at what went wrong, so we can understand how not to repeat those mistakes. So it seems very consistent with the approach that you've been taking. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And it really does tie in, because the motto I use for my program is a quote from Winston Churchill, and other folks have said it as well, but those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And it really, to me, it's a very powerful statement. And when you look back at history, I'm not talking the last 5-10 years, I mean, you can go back thousands of years. And, often I find myself, and perhaps others do the same, but something will happen, or you'll see something, oh, geez, you think you're up against something for the first time. Nobody's ever dealt with this before in history. This is just me. This is just my black cloud over my head. And this is, heck, I don't know what to do. But it really, I think, is the more you know history, and it's told in many different ways, in many different texts, and verbal and written in other ways. But when you really, like you said, when you know history and you can interpret it to some level, there's so much, how many, millions of years of human combined knowledge and history and understanding. And it's to help you, right?